Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 100th episode of the Marketing for Learning podcast. I know that this episode will just be like another episode for you guys, and it will mean nothing to you that we've done 100 of them, but honestly, this is such a monumentous occasion for myself and Ashley. I can't quite believe we've made it to 100 episodes. Before we launched the podcast, we talked about it for quite a while. So the fact that we've made it a couple of years down the line and 100 episodes, it's just phenomenal. And I'm so happy we are here. Especially after reading a report last week that said only 5.81% of podcasts make it to 100 episodes. So, we're part of an exclusive club now. But honestly, this podcast is a huge passion project for both of us. And the fact that you guys have carried on listening throughout all these 100 episodes means a lot to us. And we love the fact that us whittling on this podcast starts conversations for you and in your organisations, and some that we're probably not even privy to. So thank you for listening. We have covered so many topics on this podcast, probably topics that when we started out, we never thought we'd discuss, but we have, because you guys have helped steer the direction of the Marketing for Learning podcast. So what I thought I would do for you today is pick out the top clips from our most listened to episodes, from our favourite episodes, from some of our interviews we've had with incredible people from the L&D industry, and chunk them all together into one episode for you. So that if you don't want to, you don't have to sit and listen to 100 episodes of Ashley and I talking and laughing at our own jokes. But if you want to, please feel free. Episode 1 is our most listened to podcast. I think most people do start from the beginning. So if you're listening to this in a few years' time, well done, you've made it to 100. But I'll stop whittling on now. Like I said, I've handpicked these clips that I think will be most beneficial for you as an L&D practitioner and will have the most influence on your journey with Marketing for Learning. So let's get stuck in with the first clip of this episode. It is from a podcast I recorded. I promise I'm not that self-absorbed. It's just the way it fell. There's 2 of us. There was a 50-50 chance. But let's get stuck in with one of the biggest issues I see coming up time and time again, even after all these years, and that's our engagement problem. The reason I think we still struggle with engagement in L&D after all these years is actually how we think about our audiences. We think of them as learners. And that's hugely problematic. Whenever I talk about this topic, people say to me, oh, that's just semantics. But it's not. If you think about the people that are taking your learning as learners, you are starting off from a mindset that they want to learn, that they know how to learn, that their primary focus is learning, that they care about learning, that they want to do it. All of this we're assuming by calling them learners. We forget that there are things that they're doing away from learning, that they have different priorities. Learning's our priority, but it's probably not theirs. So we end up not finding the right solutions to getting them involved because we're only thinking about them as learners, as people that want to learn or people that have to learn. If we change that narrative and we start thinking about them as human beings with lives and jobs and families and priorities and other things going on and objectives of their own, desires, wants, needs, fears, pain points, if we start thinking about them as real human beings, that's when we can start doing things that are actually going to get them engaged. The longer we keep thinking, you're a learner, how can we get you engaged? We had a time limit to it. We make it mandatory. We incentivize it. It's all surface level stuff that isn't going to create that long long-term relationship with learning that we need if we really want to overcome the engagement problem. If you start thinking about how they've got other things on their plate and other priorities, and how can we link their priorities with our priorities, and how can we communicate that better? Actually, how can we communicate with them better, full stop? Is email the right channel? Or should we be going somewhere else? Do they hang out somewhere? Should we go and meet them there and grab their attention in the flow of the work? If you start thinking about these people as employees at the very least, but as human beings, you're going to uncover better ways to solve the engagement problem. It really is more than semantics. Please stop thinking about them as learners. So the next clip is almost an extension on what we've just listened to about engagement and how we're thinking about our audiences and thinking more like a marketer. Because the next clip is about what Ashley and I would do if we inherited an L&D team. If we, for some very strange reason, were employed as a CLO in an organisation, what we would do to get the most from our team. So this is just one step. If you want to listen to the full episode, I think it's episode 85. Go back and listen to it about how Ashley and I would handle L&D. Might make you want to rip us to shreds. But I think this clip is very important in how your team operates and what impact that will have on your engagement rates and integrating marketing into your function.
I think the next step for me would be about my team structure. How do we do learning? Are we just a content engine, mostly instructional designers and graphic designers, and we just churn out loads of content? Or are we like years ago when I did that project with ING, and we've had Al on the podcast as well, talking about how his organization transitioned from being content generators and learning content creators to purely around getting engagement with their learning. So they went from, we create a lot of learning, to actually we're really happy with the learning offering that we have and the experience that we offer. We're pretty satisfied with that. So changing the dynamics of the team, changing the skill set of the team to actually meet the need of the business, which was to get people learning. And that didn't mean adding more learning content. That didn't mean changing a learning platform. That didn't mean creating new stuff. That actually meant activating audiences using marketing skill sets and communication skill sets. So I think that would probably be my next step once I kind of understood all that landscape is, what skills do I have in my team? Are they the right people for what I'm trying to achieve? Do we need to upskill? Do we need to look at other kind of ways to get the team up to speed? But ultimately, what's our purpose? Is it, if your team is predominantly built to create content, no surprises that the organization treats you like an order taker to build content, because that's what your team's built to do. So
I think with that as well, I completely agree, looking at the team. But also, we've inherited this team, haven't we? Make sure there are no artificially made silos within your team. I am so bored of going into clients, typically when they're on the training course, and somebody goes, oh, I've been doing this, and somebody that's in the same team with them, and I'm talking teams of no more than 10, not a lot of people. Other people are like, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. That's such a great idea. Or worse still, they're trying to solve that same problem and you're not talking to one another. More often than not, L&D teams are really siloed within themselves. That needs to stop. If you had a marketing team that had like a content specialist, a social specialist, an affiliate specialist, like all these different people within the team, they talk to one another.
But they all working towards a unified strategy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's going back to our, second point of defining actually what we're doing here. But make sure there's no artificially made silos within your team. So the next clip I'm going to include in this episode is from an interview that Ashley had with Nick Shackleton-Jones. And honestly, the whole episode, it's actually one of my favourites. I really, really enjoyed listening to it. But in this clip, Nick talks about some of the issues with L&D and how they quite literally don't make sense as soon as you take your L&D hat off. But Nick explains it better, so I'll just insert the clip now.
I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking it's just learning and development has just been so chronically bereft of any kind of marketing that it's a miracle that we're still kind of in employment. And I was thinking, well, how would I explain that? And I thought, well, imagine that you and I, Ashley, we create a new product, and it's the Dingle Goober 3000, let's say, for the sake of argument. And this does nothing for any of the customers. And we know this because we haven't bothered to talk to any of them. We've done no market research. We've done no audience analysis. We've developed no personas. We're just going to create the Dingle Goober 3000 because it's easy for us and we want to turn a profit, right? And then we create this thing and then we push it out to people. How do we do that? Is it a multi-channel marketing strategy? No, we send them an email. We say, hit them with an email, says, click here. Here's a link to the Dingle Goober 3000. And because we haven't actually built a relationship with most of the people on that email list, it just looks like spam. There's a kind of a few curious people, maybe 15% of that massive list, who actually think, oh, what the heck is that? I'll click on that link, and they click on it. And you might think they're seamlessly moved into an e-commerce platform. No, they encounter some grotesque system that looks like it's from the year 2000. And they're forced to watch a dreadful video which featuring you and I talking about how important this product is to us. And then they're able to sign up and register for it. And that you might leave you wondering, well, what is the Dingle Goober 3000? Oh, it's a PowerPoint presentation with a quiz at the end. It's like, how could that, in what world could that kind of work as a product? If you actually adopted like a product management kind of mindset, which incorporates, marketing as part of how you manage a product, it's just bizarre. This is kind of like the worst way to actually develop and market and improve a product. But the only reason we do it is, of course, because that's kind of school. Nobody, it's not considered in that way. Nobody, your teachers never marketed anything to you. It was just kind of sit down, shut up, here's the curriculum. And so we sort of do that. And that's fine if all you want to do is compliance. But a lot of people in L&D want to do more than compliance. They don't just want to do compliance training where it's click on this and complete the damn module because, we can tell you what to do. Well, okay. I mean, it's a living, right? But that's not what we aspire to.
So at the start of that last clip, Nick said that L&D are chronically bereft of any kind of marketing. And I just love that phrase because it's so true. But I think some of that also comes back to either L&D not understanding what marketing really is or not understanding why we're doing it. All too often when we talk to L&D teams about the marketing that they are putting out there, it's really action-based. It's, we have a new course, go take it. We want you to do this thing, go do it now. It's very instructional. It's quite demanding. And actually, there's a lot more marketing that needs to be going on if we want to create real long-term engagement with our people. And that's because alongside our engagement problems, we also have a massive awareness problem in learning and development. So in our next clip, I am going to go all the way back to our very first episode where Ash talks to us about L&D's awareness problem.
Does L&D have an engagement problem? I might suggest that yes, in some cases we do have an engagement problem, but in many cases I would suggest that there's a deeper problem lurking. And that is a distinct lack of awareness amongst your employees with regards to the learning that you offer. And that is why we need marketing. From my perspective, nothing will ever be effective in learning. It doesn't matter how much money you spend, how many new shiny things you introduce, or how much technology is involved in your proposition, if your learners don't know it exists. Fundamentally, awareness should be your primary focus. Yes, we should be focusing on getting people engaged with our learning content once they're engaged. But in order to actually get them to connect with your content and work on engagement, they need to go to the places and the spaces that you're creating for them. And they cannot do that if they don't know it exists. We talk about learning culture and things like that. Again, how can you evolve your learning culture if people don't even know that learning is something that they can do at work, and that there's a wide range and a wealth of information and knowledge at their fingertips if only they would access it? The reality is we are in an attention economy now. You will probably know that you're competing with Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. Is anybody using Facebook these days? We're vying for our people's attention at work, out of work. It doesn't matter. They're still human beings. And we're really, really doing our best to get them to look, stop, and listen. Pay attention to what it is that you're creating. But I honestly think that we're wasting a lot of time and energy on doing new stuff, innovative stuff, game-changing stuff in many cases, if we're not going to actually focus on how we raise awareness of these things to our people. I've worked with a lot of in-house L&D functions. I've had plenty of conversations on the subject, and the amount of times that I have seen people announce a platform launch with a single email, or new leadership program, let's put a post on the intranet one time. This is not how we raise awareness. It is not a campaign of any kind, and it is definitely not going to build new habits with your people. It is not going to solidify your brand. It is not going to get your employees and your learners connected to your learning and engaged with your learning. The first step that we've got to take is getting people to know that the thing exists. Awareness is the fundamental challenge I believe we have as a learning function.
All right, so now we kind of get that we have an awareness problem, don't we? We're all in agreement, aren't we? Yes, Hannah, you're right. Everything Ashley said was perfect. I digress. Now we're aware that we have an awareness problem, and of course the engagement problem still lingers. How do we get people involved with our learning? For me, it starts with demand generation. And in the next clip, I'm going to talk about that. Demand generation, in its simplest form, is the process of increasing awareness and demand, shock, for your product or services. So essentially, it's making people realise that they want what you want to give them. And as we've said time and time again, the more people are aware, the more they can engage. If they are unaware, they can't engage at all. So it is a case of going out and making people realise that, hey, you have this problem and the L&D team has this solution. That increase in awareness will have an impact on your engagement rates, on your active user rates, on the number of sign-ups you're getting for your learning. If people are aware of it, they'll engage with it. If they're not aware of it, they can't engage with it. That's the first reason why demand generation is so important. But I actually think it's more important because it creates motivation in our people. We are trying to stop the one email approach to marketing learning. We are trying to stop the program by program approach to marketing for learning. But we are in the minority. We work in a society where marketing and learning isn't considered. And what L&D does instead is push out learning programs to people and say, take this. We don't really consider why somebody would take this, why it's important. Why would they even want to? We overcome this by answering the what's in it for me question. And that's how we tap into the motivation of our target audience. You can't generate demand if you don't know why somebody would want to get involved. And if you are then marketing based on why somebody would want to get involved, you're spiking their motivation. You're making them realise why they should jump out of bed and say, yes, I want to learn about GDPR today. I'm being facetious there. We know that people probably won't ever do that. But we are creating that motivation that might make them realise why they should get involved. And taking a demand generation approach to marketing for learning is a surefire way to do that. The next clip is part of an interview that we did, both Ashley and I did, with a very dear friend of Mass, Paula Hughes. We spoke to Paula about user experience design and the importance of user experience design in L&D. And marketers think a lot about UX design as well. As much as it's a discipline in its own right, it's something that is at the forefront of our minds. So this was such an interesting chat with Paula, who started in L&D and has kind of found a specialism in UX quite recently.
Yeah. So it is literally just putting the user at the heart of everything that you're doing, and making sure that what you're asking them to do at certain points or how you're nudging them towards things actually makes sense to them from their point of view. Especially in a workplace L&D capacity, sometimes you feel as if you're designing stuff for everybody but the person that's on the receiving end of it. So stepping into UX design recently has enabled me to just say the things that I've always wanted to say, which is, yeah, it makes sense to you, but will it make sense to them? Will they care? That sort of thing. Yeah. And just, like you say, Ash, mapping stuff out, like making sure that you know what all your trigger points are, like where you're driving people to, where they're coming from, what noise is round about it, making sure that they're focusing on the right things at the right time. And then acknowledging that there's a happy path and an unhappy path. And then when they drop into an unhappy path in a process or a journey, like how do we get them back on track? So it's just, yeah, it's a lot of thinking and exploring human behaviour is what I would say, which is probably the most interesting part of it, because the humans are your biggest variable and they never do what you expect them to do.
I couldn't agree more. I think for me, UX design is all about that championing the end user, the target audience. So in our case, in most of our listeners' case, we'd be thinking about our learners. And I love what you just said there about the happy path and the unhappy path, because so many people struggle to put themselves in that learner's shoes, don't they? They struggle to empathize, really, because we are so engrossed in our own world. So we've listened to a lot of clips in today's episode that cover a range of different areas of marketing, and I really hope it's given you a lot of food for thought. But what a lot of them come back to is mindset and what it means to think like a marketer. So for our next clip, I'm going to go all the way back to our second ever podcast episode, and actually the first episode I ever recorded. It was a conversation between myself and Ashley. You can hear the nervousness in my voice, which has given me a right giggle today. How comfortable I've become with you guys listening to me. But it's a really interesting chat we had about the importance and how to think like a marketer.
Yeah, I think some of the key things that I think L&D need to start doing more of is thinking more about their learners as customers. And I do see this discourse sometimes. So it's starting to happen, but also like the amount of times I sit and say, like, you need to think about what's in it for me. Like, you need to get into the mindset of your learners. You need to think about what drives them, what motivates them, because it's not like, oh, well, the business said that you want to do learning now, so you should do the learning. Like, they don't care. Like, I'm busy. I got work to do, and then I got to go home and feed my kids and try and cram in the gym somehow. And like, your learning doesn't enter their mental discourse whatsoever. So really, if we want to enter their mental discourse, we've got to interrupt them. We've got to convince them that it is worthy of their time. Like, I actually just had a kickoff call today with a client about campaigns, and we were talking exactly about this. Like, you need to convince your learners that learning is of value to them. And you can only do that by understanding who they are, right?
Absolutely. I'm on workshop 3 with one of my clients, and they're making jokes because of how often I say they have to refer back to the what's in it for me. But it's that important. We've gone through drip campaigns, writing for impact, understanding learners, and on every single workshop, I keep coming back to the what's in it for me.
Yeah.
Your learner does not care. And as you just said, Ash, about considering your learners as customers, your learners are giving you something that's more important than money on the whole. The people that are getting it for free.
Is that their time? Because I thought time was money.
And time is money, but it is their time. Like, I know for a fact, if you put a boring health and safety course in front of me, Ash, I'd rather watch Netflix. I'm sorry. Because I wouldn't understand what's in it for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a fundamental aspect. And, there are so many other components like creative copywriting, and I know not everyone's a natural writer, but, how can you write more compelling copy that actually provokes curiosity or, any other measure of things, or, even things like benchmarking and using data to understand the lay of the land. Like, there's such a fear in our industry, I think, personally, of people really assessing their performance. And, it's the only way we can learn. Did this do anything at all? Like, how can you spend hundreds and thousands of pounds on learning platforms, massive content libraries, and then it just goes out into the ether? Organizationally, I think L&D is in many cases still deemed a cost center. And as long as we perceive ourselves that way, we're never going to change the dynamic of how we interact with our learners, right?
No, absolutely. And let's be completely frank, it wasn't that long ago that marketing was just seen as a cost center. And there's been a real shift in perspective in the business world that, actually, what marketing can make a difference? Oh, yes, it can. Oh, and we're making a lot of return on investment here. And that's all that you and I want for L&D as well.
Yeah, and making more of what you've got, right? Like, I think it's not about investing loads or getting a marketer in your team necessarily, but if you are going to spend £100,000 on procuring a new learning platform of whatever sophistication, do you not want it to work?
Okay, so we are on our penultimate clip of this 100th episode, and I'm quite impressed it's taken us to the second to last clip to talk about this, and it's campaigns. Learning campaigns is a phrase that L&D are super comfortable with, and we use it all the time. But to be quite truthfully honest, it's used incorrectly, and it's typically used to talk about, like, I don't know, one email or maybe a Slack post or an intranet post. That's not a campaign. And actually, when campaigns are done well, they have huge impact on organisations. That's why we've won awards with a few of our clients for the campaigns we've created, but they've been done properly and effectively. So in the next clip, we're going to talk about what a campaign is and how you can develop one for your L&D function. A marketing for learning campaign is a strategic, organised effort to promote learning to boost engagement. It's not one email. It's not one poster. It's not one video. It's an amalgamation of a range of tactics that come together to work in sync with one another to promote your learning offering, to make sure people are aware of your learning offering, that they're interested in your offering, that they want to get involved with it, and then ultimately, hopefully, we can instigate action. We teach that learning campaigns are made up of 6 steps. The first is always defining your goal. Your goal may be to increase awareness, or it may be to get 15% more people using your learning platform frequently. Something along those lines. It may be to increase awareness on a particular product or a project or an initiative or a program. But we need to understand what we're trying to do with our campaign. You then want to identify who you're targeting with this campaign. This is something, again, that stakeholders in L&D struggle with. You don't have to target everyone all the time. Then you want to define your channels that you're going to use. So whether that's email, whether it's Teams, whether it's Workplace for Business, whether it's Slack, posters in your kitchen, videos on the screen, whether it's your intranet, there's so many different tactics and channels that we can use. But you also want to identify a hook for your campaign, one thing to unite it all. And then you need to make sure you have the right resources to do that. Step 5, and you might assume this would have been the last step, is to plan and execute it. Write yourself a plan, get going. Get that campaign out there. The final step is actually testing and optimizing your campaign. Every time you do a campaign, you should be learning something new about what tactics work for a particular part of your audience, what doesn't work, what subject lines work, what channels you should be using, ways to make yourself more efficient, so on and so forth. When you consider a marketing for learning campaign in that sense, I think many people would realise what's being called a campaign in other organisations isn't quite a full campaign. Often it's just repetitive noise about one topic. That's not what a campaign is. A campaign brings a topic to life. It grabs attention. It gets butts moving. So when somebody says to me, I don't believe they work, I almost want to say, well, I don't think your campaigns are very good, but I'm far too professional to do that. Okay, our final clip of this episode is a snippet from a conversation that Ashley had with Laurie and Amanda from Niles Nolan. It's about data, and I think data is incredibly important when you're thinking about marketing for learning because it informs us, it gives us ideas on what is actually happening beyond our own assumptions. But the reason I've kept this in is because I never thought I would listen to a podcast about data that made me laugh so much. Laurie and Amanda are incredible women. They're so insightful. They do so much for the L&D industry. But this podcast had me cackling. So I've included some of the funny bits in here, but please do go listen back to this episode because it's full of absolute gems and will make you laugh as well.
So when I was first writing and thinking about data in L&D, I did consider data-informed learning design. And then I realized that data-informed learning design organizations is probably the worst acronym, and I did not want to be known as that lady. So I think what it comes down to is data isn't fact, okay? Data is giving you signposts to things that you want to validate. So you really have to think about things like causations, there's correlation. You need to also think about, what is it trying to tell you and where do you need to dig further? And it's not just about the numbers. Sometimes it's qualitative data. It's a whole bunch of things together. And when people say, well, that gets really hard and muddy and I don't want to get into that, it's like, well, then you're just using intuition. At least data gives us something to start with. But it is, again, all about the validation. So if anyone wants to be data informed, you know what, who am I to judge? But that wasn't the term I went with.
It's funny, correlation, causation, all this gets like very scary, I think, for a lot of L&D leaders who are trying to start working with data. And our advice typically is, honestly, just don't overcomplicate it. It's better to do something than nothing. The main question is make sure you're asking the right questions to begin with. So are you actually doing learning for something that's going to make a difference and not just learning in a bubble? And then are you measuring your baseline? So, are you going to then be able to show that you've made any impact whatsoever? And it's funny, correlation and causation, we can get we get all upset about that or worried. But I read this quote on Twitter. I'm not a big Twitter fan, but I thought it was pretty hysterical. Everyone who confuses correlation with causation eventually ends up dead. So I guess that's, word for the wise. But when it comes to L&D, come on. I mean, let's really be honest. What is our starting point? Let's just do better. Let's start using data, not boil the ocean, start with a small use case, ask the right questions, make sure it's aligned to your business strategy and go from there. Yeah.
So there you have it. Apparently 100 episodes boiled down to just a few clips and about half an hour of your time. I hope you found this episode useful. I hope if you haven't listened to every episode, it's uncovered a few gems for you to go back and listen to. And I'm so excited for the next 100 episodes of the Marketing for Learning podcast. We are not going anywhere. If anything, we are ramping up. In the next few weeks, we will be launching our first feature on the podcast, and that will be our Sunday surgery. It's a marketing advice surgery. So we are inviting you, L&D practitioners, to come to us and talk about your challenges and we'll help you try solve them live on the podcast. Live's probably the wrong word because it will be a recording, but we'll help you solve them nonetheless. And I am launching the Marketing Advice Surgery at World of Learning this year. So if you're in the UK, I know probably about a third of our listenership is, and you are in or around Birmingham on the 8th and 9th, I think it is, of October, come and see me at the World of Learning exhibition and conference. We have a whole space for the Marketing Advice Surgery. It is beautifully called out on the floor plan. You can't miss us. Just keep your eyes peeled for the brightness and the pineapples and you'll find us anyway. But if you've got a challenge that you're trying to deal with at the moment and you think marketing might be the solution, come and see me. Have a chat. And let's see how we can help you solve your L&D engagement problems with a little help from marketing. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for listening throughout these 100 episodes. I know that there are people that have listened to every single episode, and that blows my mind. So on behalf of both myself and Ashley, thank you. We do love this podcast. It is our baby. And we really enjoy doing it. Normality will resume next week. We'll be back with a normal episode for episode 101. It's going to be a bit weird actually writing that, but we'll be back next week. So if I don't speak to you before, I'll see you on the next episode of the Marketing for Learning podcast. See you later, guys.